Welcome to the Festival
of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement, getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on us authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Hello, I'm Jim TENEYCK. I'm the author of The Life and Times of Walter Reuther. This is the last day of the Festival of Books and Storytellers. I'd like to thank Reader's Magnet for the opportunity I've had, all of my fellow authors have had in presenting their material. I like to direct the people in the audience, to my book page. I have links to samples of the writing. Now, I couldn't find them this morning this afternoon when I checked. So hopefully those links to the samples of the poetry that I'm writing currently and the excerpts from the book would be back up there. They were up there earlier, and I had some comments that people had found them, I think. So what I'd like to do today is I want to go through some of the questions that people asked during previous sessions. I have my difficulty with my vision. My trusty little magnifying glass, that one of the posters on the chat box, noted that it made me look like a detective. So, thank you for that. So let me go through some of the questions. Some of the questions there are questions that I did answer. Others are questions that I didn't see at the time, and I'll try to answer them now. How long did it take you to write the book? Well, thinking back, I retired, I believe, in 2007. A year after my retirement, I sort of went through a post-retirement slowdown where I was teaching more or less full time. So that would take us through 2008, and I taught as an adjunct at Vassar and back at Marist a year or two after that. So I think I began writing the book pretty much, or contemplating the book pretty much about the time of my retirement. I know that when I was doing adjunct work at Vassar later, that I had already started writing the book. So it took me between beginning to write the book and its publication, it took me about 7 years, to finish writing the book. A lot of that was spent doing the time doing the research. So it was a fairly long process, and I guess it's a pretty big book, that came out of it. In regards to that, I just want to emphasize that the book is titled The Life and Times of Walter Reuther, An Unfinished Liberal Legacy. So it's as much about the times as it is about Reuther. One of the reasons there were two main reasons for choosing Reuther. First of all, he was a person that I was familiar with growing up, that I admired. I admired him particularly for his, stance on civil rights. That he was one of the speakers at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial during the March on Washington in 1963, and he was a frequent. He frequently appeared at other civil rights marches, even prior to that and after that. So yeah, he was somebody I admired. Secondly, it's about the life and times of this period, and the period of the liberal ascendancy, let's say. I would date from the early 30s, from the time of Franklin Roosevelt becoming president, to the time of Lyndon Johnson, through the time of Lyndon Johnson. And some people regard Nixon as the last president that governed with a liberal agenda. A a view that I'm sure Nixon wouldn't have considered himself, and many of us that were opposed to Nixon at the time wouldn't consider either. But Nixon did introduce a lot of environmental legislation, and he was wooing the labor vote, so he introduced some labor reforms, some safety reforms, and he also was trying to introduce a health care proposal. Inadequate, let's say, in terms of what his critics were concerned, but he declared that the first year he was the president would have been 1968, 69. So, he announced that 1969 was going to be healthcare year. Uh, Other events intervened. Healthcare year never really happened. Didn't really happen in it doesn't really happen again in any sense until the Clinton proposal, Hillary Clinton, and her proposal for health care reform, which didn't go anywhere, and then the Affordable Care Act. So that was sort of the last stage of healthcare reform until whatever comes out of the Build Back Better program now. So Ruther was the one transcendent figure over all of this period. He was there at the beginning. He was there in his early youth. He toured Europe at the time of the rise of Hitler. He worked at a auto plant in the Soviet Union for a year. He came back. He was there at the first UAW convention after the birth of the CIO in 1935. He was a delegate at that convention, and his name came up a lot in that convention because there were the forces that were, still wanted to remain in the AFL, the old line voices, and then there were the reformers, many of whom were socialist, communist, etc. So he was there as a delegate from a GM plant in which he never worked. Many of the other people were there too, but the credentials. The issue of proper credentials came up, and Reuther's name came up a lot. So he had a chance to address the convention and, criticize an article in the Hearst newspaper, not the article itself, but the headline that the headline writers put to it. and about the UAW had left, the AFL. It hadn't happened yet, and and he then pointed out to the article itself, which was a fairly balanced and fair report of what was going on at the convention, praised the unionized journalists that were writing the article, and got kudos from the journalist union leader and members on the floor. So as a result, he came out of that meeting with a seat on the executive board, but no pay and no real position. And he built that into an entry point into the UAW, became the president, and was involved in many of the trends of the industry setting contracts, particularly in the later 40s into the 50s, etc. So he was a major figure in the labor unions. During the war, he had the plan for 500 planes a day, how the excess capacity in the auto plants could be used to build war material like fighter planes of a fairly simple design, and but in large quantities, that could. At the time the Battle of Britain was raging, it wasn't clear that the British were going to win the Battle of Britain, and so providing air defense for presumably for Britain and also for the United States. He had been in Germany, he had seen the rise of Hitler, and he knew what was really coming. So he did that. One of the chapter, the war years in the book, begins with the effort of Roosevelt to gain a third term, the machinations he went through to get drafted, quotes drafted, to run for a third term. And one of the main obstacles that he came to face was John L. Lewis, the leader of the CIO. He was one of the, beside Roosevelt, he would be probably the other most charismatic figure of the era. And he had a big voice within, the labor movement. So he came out, he condemned Roosevelt, he called him, don't follow your Caesar, into this battle. Your sons will come home dead, and so forth. And then made it an issue, as if the election were between Roosevelt and Lewis. And said that if Roosevelt wins, I'm going to resign my post as the CIO. So Ruther was the one chosen, or the one that came to give the rebuttal. A radio address, that the Roosevelt, we want Roosevelt, Roosevelt for the country. Later was, Roosevelt for the country, Lewis for the CIO, etc. But, he gave a strong speech for Roosevelt. So those two things, along with those two things brought him into the public eye. And so he was in the labor movement, the civil rights movement. He was one of the speakers on the stage, etc. As I've said, his role was a little bit more nuanced, let's say, than that. The best thing to say is, that there were problems. Ruther's pushing for civil rights within the UAW was not nearly as strong, let's say, as his public image, in that on the national stage. But the one thing you could say is that Ruther was a politician, like any business leader, the president or chairman of a large company is a bit of a politician. He has, the business leader has his shareholders to worry about, has, the customer impression and so forth to worry about. The labor leader is a politician. He has his his constituency within the union, which was more conservative than Ruther himself. So, his board members allowed him a lot of leeway in, voicing his more liberal agenda. But within the union itself, there were limitations on what he was able to do. So the best thing that could be said for Ruther was that he for all of the public figures, be it public figures in politics, public figures in business positions, other labor leaders, he was the one presence on the stage, that was there. None of the other people with a constituency to worry about really came out all that strongly for civil rights, be they politicians, be they particularly politicians that weren't from a district where support for civil rights was very popular. Didn't happen. So from that standpoint, he was the one white public figure that took a strong stand for civil rights. The and then other issues. He was the father of the Peace Corps. He was the plan man. Besides the 500 planes a day, there was the Peace Corps, which he proposed initially a different version of it in 1951, and then the Peace Corps plan, as it came to be implemented in 1956 at a auto convention, and presented it to in a meeting with Kennedy in 1960 after Kennedy had won the election. Ruther was telling him that Kennedy ran on one of the big issues in Kennedy's campaign was a missile gap. There was an expected missile gap between the United States and the Soviet Union. Not one that really. Not so much that there really was, but so that was the issue. And so instead of just featuring on this issue, he presented the Peace Corps to Kennedy. Also to Hubert Humphrey, who was very close with Ruther. So Ruther was a prominent figure in the Democratic Party by this time. He was the plan man. He had the plan for war production, and at the end of the Vietnam War, he had the plan for how one could, for plants that no longer needed for war production that was no longer needed by plants in areas that there weren't a lot of other plants that had a strong congressional appeal, let's say, for in Congress, because if this plant leaves, if this plant shuts down, all of these workers are going to be thrown out. So he had a plan, that of how that could be avoided and not have to manufacture reasons for continuing war production. Some of which was real, and some of it was really manufactured. He had the plan for the health care. Ted Kennedy, first health care plan was a plan that was developed by this committee that Ruther had established. He survived at least 3 assassination attempts, and his brother also survived an assassination attempt, one on Ruther and one on Victor Ruther were almost successful. So he was involved in the first nuclear protest, about putting a nuclear plant, not any nuclear plant, but a fast breeder plant, in the region between Akron, Ohio, and Detroit. He was not an opponent of nuclear power, but he was an opponent of how this plant was being presented, and that the dangers of the plant, of the fast breeder in particular, were not sufficiently invested. So he was involved in many of the issues, housing. He was in the Great Society program. His strongest voice was in housing and how the construction of housing in model cities. So he was the voice behind the Model Cities program. So that was the choice for selecting Ruther. Besides, my admiration for the man for what he was doing. Next question was. Okay. See, I'm not much better at reading my own writing than I am at reading whatever is on the screen. Advice about a system of writing a book like this one. Well, I had to do a lot of research. I had a pretty good idea of how the chapters were going to, what the chapters were going to contain. I did not write these in a particular order. I've said that each one of these chapters is pretty much self-contained. If you go from chapter 2, the formative years, which gets into the formative years of Ruther, through the strikes at General Motors and Ford, and his activities during the war, the growth the fights within the Union during these war years, and then the chapter I entitled "The Treaty of Detroit." Which is not only the one particular treaty that was called the Treaty of Detroit, that was negotiated in 1949, but subsequent treaties after that. Those, I guess, should be read, together. After that, it doesn't really matter. I have a chapter on IBM. The alternative, let's say, to the corporate alternative, the corporate welfare, let's say, alternative to the public supplied welfare programs. And a lot about the history and so forth of that. That's really the longest chapter in the book. So if you skip that chapter, it wouldn't really interfere with the rest of the flow of the book. Chapter on Vietnam, a chapter on the Cold War, a chapter on I call it the aftermath. In other words, it's the Great Society and then the reaction to the events of the 60s, the Civil Rights Movement, the later events. Civil rights, I guess, is another chapter. That should be read after reading the chapter about Ford in particular, the battle on the overpass. The chapter on healthcare could be read out of context, and the last chapter on, I call it the post-American century because the advantages that I enumerate at the beginning of the 20th century, the advantages of the geography, the advantages of the resources for the oil age, for the industrial age of the 20th century, are not as applicable, let's say, in the 21st century. And, the 21st century is not necessarily going to not be the American century, but different issues are going to, come up. And then I use that also to close out on various other issues that Ruther was involved in, like the nuclear power, like what do I call it? What was happening during those latter years. There's a book. Well, when I get to the sources, I'll name one of the books. But the fallout of different events and movements during in the society during that period. Ruther would have been he was an early supporter of environmentalism. Probably he was about 62, I believe, at the time of his death in a plane crash. the plane crash was heading toward Black Lake, a Union retreat that he and the architect that was with him on that plane crash, along with his wife, were going to check out the last minute details. It was going to host an environmental conference that was going to be a lead-in to the UN conference, the first UN conference on the environment later that year. So, his involvement with the environment. He nominated or put a woman on the executive board whose portfolio was the environment events. So that was the structure and the layout of the book. Now, someone asked me the question about sources. So I have about, I think, more than 10 pages of sources. I have, I think it was on the order of about 150 pages, at least 100 pages of footnotes and from the different chapters of the book. And then at the end of that, I have a list of the references. I was just sort of jotting some of these down. I didn't get all of them, no, certainly not all of them. I didn't necessarily even get some of my more important resources, but some of the ones that I used was there was the letters of Henry Adams. That was used in the first chapter. George McGovern, the presidential candidate in 72. Was his PhD thesis was on the Ludlow massacre, on the battle in the Colorado coal fields. So he was that was one of my sources. Another one was Robert Kennedy, writing about the labor racketeering investigation of the McClellan Commission. I have Final Jeopardy here. In that IBM chapter, toward the end, we looked at Watson, the artificial intelligence and what that meant to IBM in the future. The Final Jeopardy is sort of describing how how Watson was constructed and tested. It talks about its appearance on the actual program, where it was competing against Ken Jennings and the other guy, forget his name right now. The two most prominent Jeopardy champions at that time, and it turned out it won handily. But it also competed on a one-to-one basis with other people, maybe less, less skilled even at answering these kinds of Jeopardy type questions. It talked about a little bit about how Jeopardy changed from the earlier, some of the earlier topics and so forth that were used to what it became to be using toward the end of Jennings' run. And now it's much more on current, on popular culture now than back when at the time, let's say Jennings started his run on Jeopardy. So it was an interesting sidelight. It wasn't sort of a major source in the book at all. But one of the advantages that Watson had over Jennings and the other guy was that they were competing not only against Watson, but they were very competitive against each other. So in the sessions where the human competitor did better and sometimes outperformed Watson, they were just competing against Watson themselves. let's see, other books. Saul Alinsky wrote a biography of John L. Lewis that I used. There was Conrad Black on. Did I say that one on John L. Lewis as well? I'm not sure. Conrad Black was on. I can't read my own writing. There were two Blacks. There was Conrad Black, and there was Edwin Black, who wrote about IBM's role in the Holocaust. That there was a branch of IBM, Dehomag, Deutsche Hollerith Machine AG, abbreviated, shortened to Dehomag. That was run by a guy that was basically a Nazi by the time that as Hitler was rising, uh, he hated Watson. Watson Senior. Watson Senior didn't care very much for him. The guy by the name of Heidinger, the German director, was scoffing under that this was a company that was still controlled by IBM, worldwide. So the role in supplying the computing material, particularly those IBM cards that were very critical in the success of IBM. And the role that IBM had in acquiring the data that it needed to locate all of the dissidents and Jews and so forth that it wanted to round up. So there was that book. There was let me just okay. There was on Vietnam. There was a book by Shawcross on Kissinger and Nixon's role in Cambodia. There was a report or a group of documents, of a group that oh God. The secretary at the time. I'm blanking. Seeing my age, coming into senility. The guy that was the secretary of the Treasury, the secretary. I think he was the secretary, not state, but a secretary of defense. McNamara. McNamara formed this group that included people from both sides, Vietnamese and Americans. One of whom was General Giap, the military commander, at least at the beginning of the Vietnam War. The guy that planned the battle, that basically planned the strategy to win the Battle of Dien Bien Phu at the end of the French term in Vietnam. And so different the reports that were generated by that committee. There were other books. There was a book by a man by the name of Keith Sword, the Legend of Henry Ford. That was a major book that I used. There was a book by the man by Cowie, Staying Alive. That was the reaction at the end of the 60s, let's say. What was happening in towns across America where the industry was dying or was being a lot of production was being coming in from overseas. So other books I used. I'm just seeing if any of these would be books that would be, more prominent. Shawcross, The Role of Kissinger and Nixon in Cambodia. Stromquist, um, labor in the Cold War. There was a book by someone writing on the American Pharaoh, a book about Mayor Daley, the first Mayor Daley, was prominent in the 60s. And other books. Again, it's about a 10-page or more list of references, and I just went through it very quickly right before this session to try to answer that question. Other questions? What 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 does Walter Reuther mean to us today? What is the lesson or whatever of Walter Reuther mean to us today? Uh, well, at the end of his life, a lot of what he was done was, basically in shambles. He died in a plane crash. His union at the time, faced a lot of difficulties. He, in fact, in the union faced difficulties. He was looking for who was going to be the next generation of labor leaders that would have the same zeal and so forth that the original group of people had. The labor negotiations in the 60s became pretty ritualistic. There weren't any, especially with the UAW and its companies. There weren't strikes, there was a certain formula that both sides more or less adhered to. The union, wanted to ensure the health of the companies. The companies, wanted to assure themselves good relationships with the union. So much of what the later negotiations in the 50s into the 60s were about was retirement benefits. The one of This was especially the first battles to get retirement benefits. Helped everybody because the way that the retirement benefits were structured was that the company would ensure that the retired workers, would get 125% of the going benefits. So what they had to do was to take whatever the people were getting from Social Security and add whatever amount above that to get it up to 125% of the going rate. So what that did was now you had an ally. Not only were the unions pushing for additional cost of living increases in Social Security, but you had an ally because the companies had a reason to extend Social Security benefits. So we see the rise, the annual rise now of cost of living increases that you get to Social Security benefits, and the original security benefits were. Okay, I'm sorry. It wasn't 125%. It was $125 was the monthly rate. Social that was deemed adequate, let's say, for people to retire on. And the wages, the wages, the money, the value of money, and even into the late 40s, into the 50s, was much smaller than it was today. So $125. So if Social Security was giving you $70, the companies had to come up with the next $55 to bring the total benefit up to $125. So the raises in the Social Security meant that the company had to fork out fewer dollars. I don't know what got me into that one from the question that I was looking at. Messages of Walter Reuther. Like history goes in cycles. And at the end of the cycle in which Reuther was such a force, a lot of what he was building was being torn down. Uh, you know, uh, he was at odds with the black workers, who were increasingly in numbers in the plants. Uh, you know, there were strikes at Dodge, and it was mostly a movement of the black workers within the plant. They set up their uh, caucus is called DRUM, Dodge Revolutionary Union Movement. And there were other revolutionary union movements in various other plants within the industry. Uh, Ruther had pretty firm control over what was going on with his union. He resisted these revolutionary union movements. Uh, they ultimately also died out, but he lost a lot of support from the black workers. He lost, he didn't really have an ally in the AFL with Meany. They were totally at odds. When the AFL, when the CIO, in other words, merged, went back in with the AFL, Ruther saw it as were two things. It was he was the chair of the head of the CIO, and a defensive role to keep the CIO out of the hands of the coal, not the coal, the steel workers contingent. Autos and steels were always at odds within the CIO. Go through a bit of that history in the book. And then, he saw that his only real alternative to keep up the AFL, to keep the CIO alive, was to merge with the AFL and have this section of the industrial unions as a separate sort of branch within the CIO. Meany dominated the CIO. Ruther's voice was muted. We talked about Ruther's journey to India to soothe over ruffled relationships between the United States and India. Partly those relationships were ruffled by Meany, saying that there is no such a thing as a neutral in the battle between the forces on the other side of the Cold War and our alliance. That Nehru and Tito, the two leaders of the neutralist bloc, were not really neutral at all. And so to soothe the relationships between the United States and India, Ruther, the Indians suggested, short of Eisenhower, what two Americans would best represent, America in the eyes of the Indians. And the two nominees were Ruther and Chief Justice Earl Warren of the Supreme Court. So Ruther went. He toured India for about 3 weeks. He dressed in native garb at times. He had the meeting with Nehru. Nehru praised him as this interesting man. Some of my my contacts, or my references for that came from the Indian press, from the Delhi Times, I think it was the Delhi Times or what have you. That was one of the things. What message? Two things, I would say. Ruther's negotiating strength came from the lessons that he learned from his father. That you have to respect the opinion of your opponent, and you have to know, what your opponent wants and what he wants to get out of that negotiation, and hence he has to have, there has to be some agreement that gives your opponent something that he wants as well as what you want. So that was a hallmark, really, of many of the negotiations with the auto workers. and in later life. In that battle about building the breeder reactor plant outside of Detroit and Akron, uh, his opponent at this point was the man behind the idea to build that was a man by the name of Walter Sisler. And he and Sisler had many debates on the issue. Sisler was very passionate about his belief in nuclear energy, and debated Ruther. Ruther later was awarded the honor of a chair for the peaceful uses of nuclear energy at in Israel at the the institute in Israel. And Sisler came to join him there during that during the awarding, the ceremony, etc., on his own dime. So though they were opponents, debated each other frequently, they they had common respect for one another. Similarly, went with Charlie Wilson and General Motors and Ruther. That was part of the prologue to the Treaty of Detroit. So that was one lesson. When you're in a debate, uh, like we would be today in many different issues, know what your opponent, what the position of your opponent is, and what your opponent needs to get out of this in order to have saved some face as well. I think that was actually part of what happened in the the Iran nuclear deal that was originally set. You know, the opponents of that deal here said Iran got too much. That Iran, that there was a time limit. That there was some part of the Iranian nuclear program that would continue, etc. But Iran had to get something out of that deal. Uh, I think that the parties reached probably is the best deal that they could, and we were better off when we were under that deal, where there was some measure of control of what was happening in the Iranian nuclear program, than we are now, where there's none. Getting out of that deal was a pretty stupid move. You know, if you stayed in it, then there was always ways of strengthening the deal, lengthening the terms of the deal, etc. Once you're out, you have to renegotiate your way back in, and you're not going to get anything close to what you had before, even if you get a deal at all. So that was a lesson, that when you're negotiating, the party that you're negotiating with, be it labor negotiations or negotiations between nations, the other guy's got to get something out of it too. The motto that Ruther lived by was succinctly said, there is no better service that you can do than to provide service for your brother. And there is no greater satisfaction than have done that well. That's something we might take into the future as well, to the current as well. Okay, what in Okay, I'm trying to read my own writing, which is almost as hard as to read some of the stuff that was printed on the board. How old were you during the civil rights movement? Well, the civil rights movement actually dates back to the pre-World War II. The March on Washington movement of A. Philip Randolph, one of the chief black labor union leaders, dates back to the the American entry into World War II, and what safeguards the black workers were going to have during this particular time. There was well, a lot of the more tedious and labor intensive, maybe even work that the black workers were doing, sort of in the in the back areas, the blast furnace areas, and the steel mills, and some of the areas within the shop itself weren't so much needed for wartime production. So workers had to be upgraded. Those workers had to be upgraded to get jobs on the line, and the uh, the March on Washington movement was said that unless blacks are given equal treatment in obtaining these rights, there's going to be a March on Washington. So that was averted by Roosevelt's Executive Order 8802. The history of the struggles along racial lines in the plants and so forth is part of the book. So read the book. Okay, the public, the more public period at the beginning of the civil rights movement begins with the Brown versus Board of Education decision, early 50s, the Little Rock Nine, the attempts to integrate the white schools, now that the Supreme Court declared that separate but equal was not particularly equal, and that it violated the articles within the Constitution. So that stems from the early to mid 50s. I was in, let's say in 52, I would have been 11. So I was certainly aware of these earlier phases of the civil rights movement. In 1963, I would have been 22, I believe. No, what am I saying? In 1960, yeah, no, in 1963, I was in college in 1963. I was approaching 20 at that stage, and when I went to graduate school, that was the period of the anti-war demonstrations, the civil rights demonstrations, and so forth on campus. So that was a very turbulent period. I was caught up in these activities, so I would have been in my mid-20s at that point. And and then as the civil rights movement, and let's say the civil rights issue moves on to where it is today, I'm a little bit older than that. Next point was about writer's block. What did you have writer's block? Well, in writing the biography and this history, not so much. I mean, it was a lot of, I knew the areas that I wanted to cover. I discovered maybe some others of Ruther's involvement that were less conspicuous at the time I started writing the book. It was more a question of doing the research, trying to find articles that were, not particularly slanted one way or the other, or some slanted one way and some slanted the other. And so it was more an effort of gathering the materials, ordering the order in which I felt comfortable and ready to write the various chapters, which was not necessarily the order in which they appear in here, or maybe some of the orders that I originally intended them to go. That's so no. Now, in writing poetry, which I mentioned, that's what I'm writing now. Would I have an inclination to do something like another historical biography or some historical event? I wouldn't be able to. I couldn't do the research with my vision. I couldn't. I had a lot of visits to the library and getting books on interlibrary loans and so forth. So I think writing this book took a toll on my eyesight as well. So I wouldn't be able to do that. I'm not able to type. Even finding the right letters on the keyboard these days is a little more difficult. I'm using my trusty magnifying glass to do some of that. And I make a lot of mistakes. Like every two lines of something I write, there's usually typos, or I'm just have to look at the keyboard. I, whatever ability I had to touch type is now a hunter. I'm a hunter and pecker. So that's the situation. So no, my current writing is in poetry. I did post, and I hope it's going to be back on. The links to that will be back on by the end of this hour. Certainly by the end of the festival. Presumably, a lot of these bookstalls. I'm not sure exactly what the format is. Presumably, a lot of these bookstalls will still be active, and people can go there. There weren't any questions today, or if I had an audience or not. If I did, thank you for attending. Thank you for those of you that have expressed an interest in attending other sessions. I want to thank Reader's Magnet for what they have done to help promote the various authors in this program. I also want to invite you to visit that bookstall. If you have other questions, you can. I'll try to answer them. If you send, there's a message system where you can email me questions that you may have or comments that you may have, or if you have, purchased the book, then you can ask questions about the book as well. The last question for you are answering enjoying your session. Thank you for answering the questions. I'm enjoying your sessions. Thank you, Fairgrower XXYY. I'm not sure who you are. One of the difficulties of this format is that we don't get to see the audience. I'm here, I guess I'm addicted to the lecture method from my previous occupation. And I can't see when people are starting to fall asleep, or in this case, people can come in and or leave the room. So thank you for bearing with me. Please try to take a look at some of the excerpts to give you an indication of the writing style within the book, and the stuff that I'm doing with the poetry that I'm writing now. Thank you. Keep in touch. Okay. I still see my picture.